Hey guys, so it's Tuesday, June 15th at 3:30. So I was going to do another live for y'all. I missed last Tuesday because I was in federal court in New Orleans, so I was unable to make it out of court in time in New Orleans to try and get on a live. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the new gun legislation in Texas. Some people call it constitutional carry. Some people call it open carry. You know, I'm going to stay out of the politics of it because I don't know why gun legislation needs to be a political topic. I just want to talk about the actual legislation. And, you know, it appears that Texas has decided that anyone who's 21 years or older and not otherwise legally prohibited will now be able to carry a gun in a holster or concealed without any type of training and perhaps without any assurance that they have any knowledge of guns at all. And I'm not a big fan of this legislation. You're still going to be prohibited in the same places as you were before: government buildings, schools, all the same prohibitions that existed. One change though now, apparently when you go into a private business, it's no longer enough for that private business to merely have a sign telling you that guns aren't allowed. Apparently they now have to verbally tell you that they don't allow possession of weapons inside their establishment. And I suspect that that's probably going to end up falling by the wayside because there's going to be too many businesses where it's impossible to have someone standing at the front telling every single customer that guns aren't allowed inside. So I guess you're going to start seeing them, you know, while you're grocery shopping. I'm not sure. I guess time will tell with that. Just, you know, some of the things that seem odd to me. So I hunt. My son and I go deer hunting every deer season. And because I was born in 1972, in order to legally hunt and get a hunting license, I had to take a hunter safety course. My son, who is now 19, also had to take the hunter safety course. So to hunt, I have to go through a safety course, take a test, pass it, pay a fee to the state of Texas, and then I can legally hunt. But now, apparently, and you're still going to have to do that. This new legislation hadn't done away with that. So to hunt, you're still going to have to become educated. But now, when you turn legal drinking age in Texas, you're free to just go buy a gun for your birthday and strap it on your hip and, you know, walk around. And that just seems contrary to common sense to me. I'm also licensed to carry a handgun. And so when I initially got my license, I had to pay a fee to the state of Texas, go through an extensive background check, take a course, pass a written exam, and then pass a shooting proficiency exam so that I could legally carry a handgun. And it was not an issue for me. It was not anything that I thought was overburdensome or heavy-handed. As a matter of fact, you know, I've been around guns since I was a kid, just like my son. And so I know gun safety, it's not an issue. But that's not the person I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about now just anyone who doesn't have prior felony or domestic violence conviction or under domestic violence terms or on probation or anything like that. But any person who turns 21 who doesn't have any of those prohibiting factors can just go buy a gun and carry it. They may not have ever shot a gun in their life, but now they can walk around the mall possibly, if they don't have someone at the entrance telling them they can't carry it, just walking around with a gun. and it just makes very little sense to me. But this was the legislation that came out and was then passed by the House and Senate and sent to the governor's desk for signature. And, some of the proponents said what I consider to be silly things like a lot of people don't have the time and the money to get a permit. Well, the money that it costs to have the license to carry is not even it's not a quarter of what a gun costs to purchase. So I have a problem with that. They don't have the time, they don't have the money to get a permit, but they have the money to buy the gun that you're now just going to let them carry. As far as the time goes, I agree can be a problem. People work, but in my experience and what I had seen, these courses were offered by so many places that you could do it any day of the week. And the times were pretty flexible as well. There were even people that would give you private instruction to meet your schedule. So the time issue I have less sympathy for. But again, this is where we are. I think a lot of law enforcement agencies were not in favor of this legislation because, being a licensed carry holder, if I'm encountered by the police for any reason, when I give them my ID, my driver's license, I'm also supposed to give them my license to carry. Now that no longer exists. So you're going to put officers in a situation where every stop they make, they have to wonder if this person is armed and is this person, intending to do me harm. And again, we didn't do any legislation regarding people that shouldn't have guns. We just decided to let everyone have a gun unless they're legally prohibited. As I said, convicted felon, domestic violence, mental problems. You still have to go through the background check to buy a weapon, assuming you buy it legally. If we're talking about other situations where a dad gives his son a gun, there's not going to be any type of background check or registration of that weapon. Same thing, 21-year-old gives his 21-year-old buddy a gun. There's not going to be any paperwork on that. There's not going to be any background check. It's just the dude got a gun. So, while some people, I guess on both sides of the political spectrum, were wanting something, it just seems to escape all of it in the end. But, I guess this is becoming the trend. Apparently there are now 20 states that have this type of legislation with open carry. I've not dug down on statistics of what happened when the other states initiated that, what happened to their shootings, crime rates, these type of things. If you watch the local news, there was a carjacking, I think, in Houston this week, and the victim actually shot his attacker. I guess maybe we'll see more of that. And obviously people defending themselves isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that's not what I'm concerned about. It's, like I said, everyone just wearing a gun on their hip like we're in the wild, wild west again. And we're just going to have to see where this legislation leads us. I don't know what else to say about it, to be honest with you. For those of you that are going to carry, you need to make sure that if you're going to travel, let's say you're going to take a vacation from here to Florida, you're going to need to check each state along the way that you'll pass through to find out what their laws regarding gun carrying and transport is. For instance, Oklahoma and Texas are pretty much identical. You can travel freely between Texas and Oklahoma with your weapon and not have any issues. I do not think that's the case if you went to New Mexico. I think you could run into some problems if you did that in New Mexico from Texas. But like I said, you're just going to need to research any state that you're going to be crossing in your vehicle to make sure what their laws are. As I said before, I think now we've got 20 states in the union that allow open carry like Texas does. That means the rest don't. So you would want to know exactly what you were getting into if you were going to try to travel with your weapon. But that's where we are. I don't know, many of you probably know there's a problem getting ammunition. There has been, I guess somewhat due to the pandemic and the availability. I don't know when that's going to normalize, but ammunition, I guess, is still going to be hard to come by for a while. And so I guess after September, it'll be open carry. We'll see how it works. Again, you know, anyone can do it now that's 21 and older who's not legally prohibited. There has been some discussion that for gun crimes there will now be tougher punishment for those prohibited, like convicted felons and the others I've mentioned before. So we'll see how that works out. That's about all I have to say about that. I don't see any questions. We'll see how it works. Maybe I'll do another one in the future after it takes effect, and we'll see what it does. Another thing that I had several questions about on the internet, on either Facebook or by email, was about polygraph examinations. And, you know, from this side, from the defense side, you know, I would always, well, not always, I can't think of a time, I don't think I've ever told the defendant to go take one issued by the police. They're not admissible in court, and so they're not going to help us. They're really usually only going to hurt us in defense of a case. Even though they're not admissible in court, a lot of police agencies use them as an investigative tool, and will then hold it against you even though it can't be used in court. But the prosecutor now knows about it, so the prosecutor, if they don't like the answers or indicated that you gave false answers, they're going to hold it against you, even though, again, it's not admissible in court. On the flip side of the coin, I've had cases where I thought, hey, let me get my guy a polygraph test, lie detector test, and maybe that will help sway the prosecution. But when you try to do that as a defense attorney, 99% of the time, the prosecution's response is, well, they're not admissible in court, so I don't care. I've had a client, what I call pass a polygraph exam, and I wanted to submit that information to the grand jury, and that particular prosecutor refused to do so. It didn't matter. It didn't end up mattering. We submitted a grand jury packet without the polygraph results, and just with what our investigator had found, and the grand jury ended up no billing his case anyway. But the whole point of the thing is, and why I had to post it all about polygraph examinations, is because they only hurt if the police officer or whoever's giving you the examination, if it's not a police officer, it's someone that contracts with the police, they're trying to get you to fail, and then they want to use that against you to try and pressure you into confessing or giving them more evidence or whatever it is. So why would you? It's like the same thing. Why would you go talk to the police without an attorney? If you're going to ask me, I'm going to say you shouldn't, and don't do it. And then, like I said, when I've tried to use them on this side, then the prosecution just snaps back with, well, they're not admissible in court. So, I understand the value of them as an investigative tool because I've used them. But at the same time, we're tied with the situation where, since they're not admissible in court, if their own motives fit, then they don't want to let you use them. So it's kind of, just an odd situation. And, these days, I don't know how often they're used. I don't have many cases where they are actively used in an investigation. I know that they are used quite a bit When people are on probation for sex offender offenses, they many times, as a condition of probation, are required to submit to polygraph examinations. And then, of course, in that situation, if you fail one, the state wants to use that to somehow revoke your probation or punish you. But since you're on probation, and if it's a condition, you don't have the option of rejecting. So it's just a strange situation, and it all stems from them not being admissible in court. Obviously, if they were admissible, then they would carry a lot more weight and they would get a lot more use. And the question, why aren't they admissible? Because basically they've been determined to be scientifically unreliable as far as the results go. So that being said, it just goes back to, then why would you do it? So yeah, if you're offered a polygraph by a police agency, I would definitely say don't do it. But again, at that point, you already talked to the police too much. If they're offering you a polygraph, you need to stop and say, I want my lawyer here before we discuss anything else. So I don't see any questions in the comments, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up for today. I hope that you guys have a good week, and I'll hopefully see you next Tuesday.